Hello, hello, everybody. Welcome. Hello, everybody. Welcome to Ask Me Anything on the Clarinet. I'm so glad to see you all. And we've got people joining in two different places. Some of you are seeing me live from Facebook, so welcome to you. Some of you are joining in through Zoom, which is the link that I emailed out to everybody. So just love to see you all. There are a couple ways you can ask me your questions. Basically, we want to have you type them into the comments box. So if you are on Facebook, just go ahead, introduce yourself, let us know where you're from, type it in the regular comments box. If you're watching on Zoom, you'll see at the bottom of your screen a thing that says chat, and just open that up. It looks like a little chat bubble, and it'll allow you to introduce yourself. What helps me, because we have lots of people who are attending, if you have a question, if you just put a few question marks at the beginning of it, and then I know where you're from. So Emily has said hi. Hey, Emily, good to see you. I'm going to be sort of switching back and forth on my computer between Facebook and Zoom, but we have Mark from Colorado and Harry from New Jersey, Sitsky from the Netherlands. So I love that the Clarinet Mentors community is worldwide. And Dawn from Idaho, John from California. So welcome, everybody. Just go ahead, introduce yourself. And I will be recording this to send it out later. But for those of you who are here live, I have a couple special door prizes I'll be giving out today. One is the Bakun Wood Care Kit that they've offered up. It has great stuff to take care of your clarinet. If you have a wooden clarinet, it has things especially for that. But even if you don't, there's a lot of accessories in here that are going to be really useful to you with the clarinet that you have. And I'm also giving away a special grand prize today, which is any one of my Clarinet Mentors courses. So if you already have some courses, there might be one you have your eye on. If you've never tried my more extensive training, then you get to pick the one that comes from you. So I have a few things I'm going to talk about just before we start, but then I want to dive into as many of your questions as I can. So I appreciate that you're filling us up with questions as we speak, which is great. So, and I see Stephen is saying he'd like to join in. Stephen, we're live right now on the Clarinet Mentors page. I'll just put a little note to that effect and see if that works. And most of you who are watching me obviously have figured out how to get there. So hopefully Stephen will figure that out and join us too. All right. And I look over on Facebook. We have Angela from Ontario, Jasmine from England. Awesome. Thank you. Great to see you all wherever you're calling in from. So there's a lot of questions coming in, which I'm going to get to shortly. I'm also going to talk about my Black Friday, Cyber Monday special, and I'm just calling it Clarinet Friday. And at www.clarinetfriday.com, you can get details. I'll share that more with you later. But while we have a lot of clarinetists in one place, I wanted to share 3 really basic, really simple things that I check in with on myself from time to time. And whether you're a new player or an experienced one, even if you've heard this before, it's a very quick reminder of things that can make our playing easier instantly. One of them, very simple, is, are we putting the optimum amount of mouthpiece in our mouth? In my experience, most of us over time slide toward the tip of the mouthpiece. And even though we can play well and we sound good, we're not making the most out of the response that our reed could be giving us. So very, very easy way to test is just take any note, even the open G, where we just put it in our mouth and blow, and put some in your mouth, put a bit more. If you get a bigger, better sound, that's a sign you could be using more. Put more. Eventually you get a horrible squeak, and then you've gone too far. So the idea is we want to go right before that squeak point. That's just a quick thing you can check. In fact, you can have your clarinet out. Some of the things I'm sharing with you, you might even just want to try on the spot, although you can always watch the replay later. The second just mini thing to check that is a habit I see affecting so many players in a bad way is how you hold your head and how you hold your clarinet. From time to time, we slip into the habit of looking down, and that does 2 things that cause us trouble. It restricts our airflow a little bit, but also the angle our head makes to our clarinet really affects your tone. there's no perfect one angle. Everybody's mouth and jaw is different. So you need to find the angle for you. But again, making sure your head is straight up as if you're just saying hello, like I am right now. I encourage you to just play moving your clarinet around and see where it gives you the best sound. Now, the further in we pull it, the more it pushes against our bottom jaw a bit. So sometimes we need to accommodate that by opening wider to really hear how that's going to sound. But I have my students do that regularly. If you're comfortable playing a high C, thumb and register key, since it's such a reactive note, that's a really good one to test. You can even hear, even through the computer, the difference it makes. I'm going to start with it pulled so far in, I know it's too far because I'm muffling the reed. And when I get way out there, it doesn't sound so good. In fact, I lose the sound. But if you play with your head down, it's kind of equivalent to holding it way up here. Now, you do see players holding their clarinets out and playing for show and having fun with it. Part of that's theatrics, but also often when a really good player lifts their clarinet out to play for the audience, you'll see that they're lifting their whole head so that they're not actually interfering with that angle a whole lot. So that's two quick things you could just check that might make your playing better right away. There is so many questions. There are so many questions pouring in. I'm just going to dive right in and start answering them. So I really appreciate hearing from you. If you have more questions, feel free to put them in. So the first one comes from Leona. She says, what's your experience with Legere Reeds, European signature softening up, suggestions? So Legere Reeds are one of the synthetic reeds. They come in a box like this. And I will say that I have switched to using Legere Reeds virtually exclusively. It did take me some getting used to, and I will confess that I used to have a position, frankly, against plastic reeds. Every time I had tried them, I just felt like there was something missing. They had a tinny sound, or it was lacking the resonance of wood. And frankly, what changed my mind is hearing some of my favorite players in the world playing on them and sounding amazing, and sounding beautiful. And it certainly didn't fit my stereotype of what a synthetic reed sounds like. And I realized that for them, they're playing the Legere European cut, which is a relatively new reed that I think many of the world's greatest players are starting to use. Now, it responds differently than a cane reed, and it doesn't work on all mouthpieces. So it's certainly worth a try, but generally they work better with mouthpieces that have what we call a more closed tip, so that that space between the tip of the reed and the mouthpiece is not as large, because they don't move quite as flexibly as a cane reed. It took me about 6 weeks of not playing cane to really create the sound I wanted to on the synthetic reed. So I think I do some things differently, but it's made my life so much easier. They don't change with the weather. They last a long time. If I'm doing a show, like right now I'm doing the Nutcracker, where I'm playing 3 different clarinets, and sometimes an instrument has to sit there for 40 minutes while the dancers play, and I have 10 seconds to put one instrument down and grab the other. And on the cane reeds, it would just be, I would be praying to the reed gods, please reed work. And sometimes it did, sometimes it didn't. The synthetic reeds work. So my suggestions to make them work well is, first of all, try it out. And if it may not be a good fit on your mouthpiece, but if you really like the idea of having life be much easier that way, you can try some other mouthpieces. There are many that work well with synthetic reeds. My favorite right now is the Vocalise. They come in 3 different sizes, so you can sort of find the one that works well for your face. And I always say with mouthpieces, everybody is so different at how our mouth structure works. People can recommend good mouthpieces, but it's really great if you can play test them yourself. If you have a music store near you that lets you come in and try out mouthpieces, you can tell very quickly if a mouthpiece works for you or not. So I encourage you to do that. But that is a tip for the Legere Reeds. Find a mouthpiece that works. The Vocalise all work well, whichever size fits your face. They do as a cane reed will do, over time, the Legere reeds do get softer, but it takes much longer than it does with cane reeds. There is still a little bit of breaking in to do. And like cane reeds, which many of you play on cane reeds, it's a great idea to have more than one reed in your case that you play on, so you're rotating through them. Some that are newer, some that are older. Even the synthetic reeds seem to work better if we give them a little bit of a break. I mean, I do know some people who buy one and they play it for 4 months and it works pretty well for them, but I think they have better results if they're switching. And like a cane reed, eventually they wear out. They reach a point where they're not so good. If you're rotating, you're just going to be more attuned to that. You'll notice the newer reed sounds much better than the older reed. And as a really loose general guideline, I find one synthetic reed will last about as long as a box of 10 cane reeds. At least that's how I look at it compared to when I used to buy boxes of cane reeds. The other thing about the synthetic reeds, I find they respond better when the ligature is on the higher side than you might have it with the cane reed. So you know how, let me see if I have a little drawing here. So this is, I was using it earlier for something else. We can see the curve on our reed. The ligature on a synthetic reed should be virtually right up to that curve. And they like the ligature to be much tighter than you would normally have with a cane reed. On a cane reed, I find we kind of want the ligature a little lower. In the top, if you have a 2-screw ligature, the top screw just tight enough that it's not loose, so that the reed has lots of vibration. These synthetic reeds, they like to be on tight, in my experience. So Leona, I hope that answers your question. I hope I've said your name right. It might be Ilona. Zoom has given you kind of a strange label, so I'm hoping that's correct. My apologies if I've said your name wrong. All right, Tracy, can you address thumb wrist problems with thumb pain issues? Any suggestions for exercises that would help? I have a couple of suggestions. One of them that works for many, many people is get a clarinet neck strap. There are many good ones out there. I have my blingy one on, which I just love. I'm performing later today in it. It's made by BG. They have many clarinet straps, but some of them have a more elasticy strap like this one does. I like that because it still supports the weight, but if I'm, well, maybe I move a bit when I play, so I find it gives me some freedom. Other people prefer it to be rigid and they have a solid cord. I recently, I brought a bunch of BG straps to a concert band I play in and handed them out to the whole section to play test. And about half of them like the rigid ones, half like the flexible ones. If you have a thumb rest that has a hole for it, it straps right in. But if you don't, they come with a little leather adapter that fits over your thumb rest. That can help. Another thing I think that makes a huge difference is having your thumb rest at the right height for your hand and your thumb. And honestly, this can make a huge difference. So here's my guideline for how to test that. If you take your hand and make a little finger puppet, if you're just joining me and you're wondering why I'm doing finger puppets, which would be very strange if someone just tuned in, this is the Ask Me Any Clarinet question, and I'm answering something about thumb pain. So make a little finger puppet with me, and then just close it where your hand naturally closes. When I do this with a group of people, I'll say, look around the room. And what I want you to look at is where your thumb aligns in relation to your index finger and your middle finger. For me, it's more on my index finger than my middle finger, but it's on both. So maybe 2/3, 1/3. Some people naturally, it's under their middle finger. Some people naturally under their index finger. I believe when you're not thinking about it and just doing this, your hand will align in its natural, comfortable position. We want to emulate that on the clarinet. So in other words, for me, I want my thumb to be sitting closer to my index finger, but still maybe, 2/3 of the way between them, which is how I have it set. Now, I'm lucky I have an adjustable thumb rest that's very easy to move. Many clarinets, it's stuck in one spot. So here's some things you can do. If you need your thumb to go lower than your thumb rest does, then put a big fat thumb rest cushion on. I love this one. I'll just pull it off so you can see it. The This one is really thick and soft, and it has this little sort of non-stick pad. This is made by Duo Music, D-U-O. And they have an extra wide one because I have a very wide one, and a narrower one that fits the standard thumb rest, but it's super comfortable. If you need it to go higher and you're just curious to see how that works, you can just, as a test to see if your hand actually feels better, maybe sit your clarinet weight on your leg so you're kind of holding it there, and put your thumb on top of your thumb rest and just try playing clarinet. Obviously, I don't want to encourage you to hold your weight right now. I have it sort of jammed between my legs on my knee, but it will give you a sense if your hand feels more comfortable. And if it does, then you can either have a good technician put on a movable thumb rest, which is a great idea, or move your thumb rest up. I've seen some people take their thumb rest and just turn it upside down so they can use the same screws, the same screw holes, but it lifts it another, whatever, 3/8 of an inch, half a centimeter, depending on where you're watching from. But that can make a big difference. So Tracy, it's getting the thumb rest in the right place, taking weight off it. I don't have any defined exercises I use. A physiotherapist would be better trained at that, but I think it's making sure you're not straining your thumb by having it in the wrong position helps prevent that strain, and taking the weight off helps. These are great questions. Thank you, everybody. I'm just going to carry on going through and answering questions. All right, Sitski says, my old Vandoren Mouthpiece B45 for the greater part plays in tune with a 3, but 3 identical MD5 mouthpieces also meant for A442 played with the same reed tend to be significantly low. Loves the sound. Should I send them back? Okay, great question. I'm not a mouthpiece expert, but I'll answer this to the best of my ability. A company like Vandoren that makes so many good mouthpieces, they do on their own website have a chart showing you tuning tendencies. They've created some that tend to play higher, which is aimed for parts of the world where we play higher, Europe and Asia. They have some that play lower. North America tends to play a bit lower. And if you find a mouthpiece that you absolutely love, and the tuning throughout the registers is consistent. In other words, maybe it's 10 cents sharp, but every single note is exactly 10 cents sharp, and you love how it responds, then it might be worth keeping that mouthpiece, but finding a longer barrel so that you can play in tune with that mouthpiece you love. If you have a mouthpiece, and whenever you're testing mouthpieces, you should always check with the tuner where the tuner goes all over the place. Some notes are sharp, some notes are flat. That's trouble. It's going to give you a headache there. So, Sitski, you and I had talked about mouthpieces. I think that finding one that you love the response and feel is really important. There may be another mouthpiece out there in the world that matches your existing tuning, and that might be worth searching for as well. But I guess I'll just say, having it be consistently sharp or consistently flat, as long as it's consistent. If you're too low, I think is what you're saying, a shorter barrel may solve it for you. But of course, that's more equipment. Not sure if you want to get into that or not, but that's my thoughts on that. James said, what are the signs you might need to switch to a stiffer reed? And do you have any tips for making the transition to a stiffer reed easier? James, that is such a good question. At the very beginning, I actually had my third point down was to talk about that, and then I dove into questions. So you're reading my mind here. We often, unless you know what to look for, it's hard to know if you've outgrown your reed strength, but generally you start on a lighter strength, maybe a 2, 2.5, and as your air gets faster, your embouchure gets stronger, we tend to go up to stronger reeds, higher numbers, which are more resistant, and they help. They allow us to use stronger air to get more tone control, to have the high notes respond better. And all that's a good thing. Excuse me, I need a sip of tea here. The clues that our reed might be getting too soft for us, I think the most obvious one will show up when we're in the higher notes, the higher register of the clarinet. And the higher we go, the more sensitive and the more reactive our notes are. So if you're trying to play high, and here's a good test, start on your clarinet C that's just at the top of the staff, and try tonguing up note by note to the high C, thumb and register key. If your reed is too soft, you're going to find as you get to the top, you start getting this growly undertone. And I'm just going to imitate that. I'm sure you'll recognize this sound. Recognize that sound? That low growl is a classic sign the note does not have enough support. Now, support comes from our embouchure, it comes from our air, and it comes from the reed. So, you know, usually just by putting more air through, we can make it work. But if that's happening commonly, then you may have a reed that's too soft. And a quick way just to check is to take the reed that you have on and move it higher on the mouthpiece, maybe a millimeter or so higher, and see if those notes respond better. Sometimes when we do that, it's too high for being ideal for that reed. So it's going to feel a little hard. It's going to sound a little airy. But if you do that and those high notes respond better, it's just a diagnostic tool that, oh, yeah, maybe I need a stronger reed. Now, keep in mind, reeds get softer with age. So if you've been playing on your current set for a very long time, maybe they say 2.5, they might now be a 2 1/4 or a 2, and a new 2.5 might be fine. But as far as how to transition, it depends on what kind of reed you're using. Some reeds come in quarter strengths. It's one thing I like about the Legere European cut. They come in quarter sizes. So if you're on 2.5, you can try 2 3/4, and the change is not huge. And usually, if you're showing signs that you've outgrown the 2.5, the 2 3/4 will feel easier right away. With many reeds, they only go up by half sizes, and sometimes that's a big change. I really like the Vandoren V12 reeds, but I find with many of my students, the gap between 3 and 3.5 feels huge. And you know, they're outgrowing the 3, but they try the 3.5, and it's just so hard to blow and so resistant. I don't think you should play on a reed that feels really hard to play, where you're totally tired out after 10 minutes. If it's just a little bit hard to play, that sometimes we can stick with it for a week or two, and our body will respond by blowing faster air to make it work. And that helps us adjust to that size. So let's say you're on cane reeds and you're on Vandoren V12, and the 3.5 is too stiff, the 3 is too soft. Then you might try a different cane reed that's sized a little bit differently. In that example, the Vandoren V21 3.5 kind of sits between the V12 3 and 3.5. So that's the workaround, is you just find a strength that's a little better. And having said that, if you buy a box of 10 cane reeds, if you play through the whole box, and sometimes I would just take a little thing of water and try the whole box in 10 minutes. And it's literally soak a few reeds, pop it on, play a few notes, and go, good, awful, yeah, pretty good. I'd put them in categories right away. Some of them are going to be softer than others. So if you're trying a higher strength, pick the ones out of the box that are the easiest to blow. All right, I hope that helps, James. So many great questions here. I'm going to just pop over to Facebook and take a question from the Facebook category, because we have so many people everywhere. Helen says, how can we tell if a Legere reed needs to be replaced? That's a great question, Helen. I think very similar to how we would tell with a cane reed, that it starts to wimp out on higher notes. The tone might not be as resonant, but that's the advantage of having a couple reeds that you rotate between. Is if you sound really good on Monday and not so good Tuesday, it might be that the Tuesday reed is starting to wear out, and you just need to check that out. Okay, continuing on. These are great questions. Thank you so much, everybody. Tom says, after many years of hitting middle C, C sharp, D very easily, suddenly they are squeaky. I need a lot of extra air to have a chance of hitting them. Is this a symptom of an air leak? It sounds that way to me. If notes that normally work well on your clarinet suddenly feel really resistant, something's probably leaking on your clarinet. And, you know, this is where a good technician is going to help you. But generally, if you're talking about like the low C, C sharp in this area, usually then something's leaking in that part of the clarinet. It could be this key right here, might mean your bridge key's out of alignment, but without seeing your clarinet, Tom, I'm just guessing. But yes, it's it's usually not you that's the problem if it's just a few notes on your instrument. So I would get that checked out. Yeah, and Harry says there might be dirt in the hole. That can be it too. So there's something is just not sealing properly. Louise says, where's the tip of the reed? At edge of the reed or a little behind the edge? So Louise, again, here's my not so great drawing, but this dark area here is generally what we call the tip of the reed, the top of the reed. And that's the part that does most of the vibrating when we're playing our clarinet. Mark says, tips for starting again after a 25 to 30 year absence. Don't want to relearn bad habits. Trouble with throat tones, proper embouchure. Mark, that's a great mindset to have, that you don't want to start with bad habits. And I think if there's one advantage to not having played for a long time is your bad habits are rusty. So you can come into it now with much, much better habits. And there are many, many good habits to have. And what I'm going to recommend, Tom, if you don't mind, send me an email, michelle@clarinetmentors.com, and I will send you some links to some of the videos I have that are designed for people like yourself who are getting back into it. One of them is called How to Play Clarinet More Easily, and it just kind of lists the habits to get you started. And, you know, there's a few major habits, if we have in mind, make it a lot easier. Hey, Corrado Giuffretti's in the house. Hello, Corrado. And I see Maurice here. Wow, we've got like famous clarinetists here. If I had the technology, I would ask them to ask Corrado to perform for us, but good to see you, Corrado. All right, going through. Michelle, hi, Michelle, asks me, how do we take care of reeds? Care, lipstick, so lots of questions there. There are lots of thoughts on taking care of reeds. If you have a synthetic reed, many of your questions disappear because other than rotating through them and making sure we don't break the tip, they're much easier to take care of. But aside from that, if you have a cane reed, some simple guidelines would be to break them in gradually. A brand new cane reed, I find after about 10 minutes, it kind of gets waterlogged. So there are different schools of thought out there, but most people agree that you start playing them bit by bit. There is a school of thought that you can take a brand new reed and soak it for a long time in water to it leaches out some of the things in there and it helps seal up the holes. Our saliva over time helps a cane reed to degenerate. So we want to protect it from that. Some people will wash their reeds out when they're finished playing before they put it back in their case. Some people will dip it in Listerine or something along those lines. But I usually break in my cane reeds gradually. I do recommend you keep them in a good case. Cane reeds are susceptible to warping. I'm just going to grab an example of a case. Any kind of case that has a flat glass, platform that you can soak them on or have them sit flat helps so that the reeds don't warp. There are many good reed cases out there, but just the case that comes in the box of reeds is there to protect it in shipping, but it doesn't really keep it from warping. So a good reed case helps. As far as lipstick on the reed goes, you can clean your reeds by putting them in hydrogen peroxide, just a solution of hydrogen peroxide in water, just your drugstore. And it helps with cane reeds and with synthetic reeds just to get better. There's some lipstick out there that doesn't come off on reeds. You need like the super durable, never remove lipstick, but look for that in a makeup site and you'll find them. All right, moving on. John asks, how frequently should we oil our clarinets? If you have a wooden clarinet, you want to oil the wood. I just had a YouTube video on how to oil it, which you can all watch. There's also a YouTube video on how to take care of reeds. So if you're not familiar with the Clarinet Mentors YouTube channel, it's youtube.com/clarinetmentors. There are many good resources there. But John, a good guideline is follow the seasons, follow the equinoxes and solstices, for example. That's what I do. It's 4 times a year. Having said that, if you're in a very dry climate, or I find in cold climates when furnaces come on and the air is drier, if your wood looks dull, it's not shiny, and you can start to see the grain of the wood appear more deeply, kind of like preludes to cracks, then that might be a sign that it needs oiling. So you just have to keep an eye on your clarinet as well and oil it as it needs it. We want to make sure we don't get oil on the pads, but oiling the bore of the wood is a good thing to do. All right, great questions. Thank you all. I may not get to all of these, but I'll answer as many as I can. So great to have you all here. Nan says, I have problems getting high notes to come out nicely with good tone and no squeaking, starting up on high B. Any pointers for this? Yeah, Nan, I think for all of us, high notes is where we see our problems happening because they're more fussy. They just react more. So that being the case, whenever music feels challenging, our body's instinct is to, I'm gonna do it, is to tighten up. And tension in the body where we don't want it causes us trouble. So if we squeak, if you've been playing long enough that you can play those high notes that you mentioned, 90% of the time squeaking is biting on the reed, and that's tension where we don't want it. So we want to train ourselves to have good support for the note, but that support mostly comes from our airstream. And most of the time when high notes are not working well, it's because we're not blowing our air quickly enough. Here's a tool if you have your clarinets out. If you haven't tried this, I highly recommend it. It's a fingering for a note that doesn't like to play well at all. I call it the embouchure tester, but it's thumb register key, first two fingers on our left hand, leaving that hole free. The next two fingers, it's actually an alternate fingering for high G sharp. It's an awful fingering, but it's great to see if your embouchure and air is working. So if it squeaks, and this will squeak super easily, there's a squeak. That's a sign that I'm biting too much. So I'm going to think about rounding the corners of my mouth in, bringing everything down, and get it to happen more freely. If I can get that note sounding like our written G sharp and feeling easy, then try some of those high notes with the same air and embouchure. It usually works very, very well. The other thing this fingering does really easily is gives us that growly low sound. And that's a sign that our air is not moving quickly enough. And we need to do more with that. There are some videos I have from my Better Clarinet Tone course. They're like all my courses. I have free preview videos, and I often give away the best training in those free previews. I think I'm going off the top of my head. It's betterclarinettone.com/get-started. We'll sign you up for just some free videos, and it gives you some tools like that just help make sure you got your embouchure and air on the right track, but that tool should help. All right, next, DAW, maybe it's Dawson, I don't know, for some reason Zoom calls you DAW. So DAW, I have a question referring to E-flat clarinet because I play it for school upcoming auditions. Articulation, that it squeaks. Okay, the higher you play, a squeak comes out. So DAW, I would say it's probably the exact same issue we just talked about when we squeak. It's usually that we're biting. Even though the E-flat mouthpiece is smaller, if we're biting, just try and counteract that by bringing your corners in and allowing the sound to come out more freely. When it feels hard, we tend to bite down. Bert's asking, what's the difference between a trill and a flutter? A trill usually will be written, with that zigzaggy line, often a TR in front of it. A trill is taking the written note and moving to the note above it really quickly. Ya-da-da-da-da-da-da-da. A flutter is like a growly gutter. And I confess, flutter tonguing, I suck at. Almost every other clarinetist friend of mine can do it. I cheat. I growl. Sounds like this. That's what a flutter tongue sounds like. It's a special effect. And it's more so in contemporary music, you're going to see that. All right. Ray says, can you talk about the Kuhlmann thumb rest? Does it really remove weight on the thumb? It's impossible to add a strap. Does the no strap matter? So the Kuhlmann thumb rest, I don't have, but a lot of my students do, and some of them have loved it. It sort of comes on there, and there's different versions of it. I know people who love it. It allows you to support the weight on different parts of your hand, and I suggest you just look it up. I haven't used it myself, but I know people who've really gotten good results. So that's someone else who's tried to look at this thumb issue, and that's a great point. Thank you, Roy, for bringing that to my attention. Next question, is there a recommended ligature for synthetic reeds? Not particularly. I love Silverstein ligatures. I like BG ligatures. I do find, though, you need one that can crank up tightly with the synthetic reeds. On mine, I find the BG Duo, which I have on today, works really well. On my Silverstein, I put an extra mouthpiece patch on the back to help it stay stable, and then it sounds great. So most ligatures will work. You just have to experiment with it a bit. Next question. I have a vintage Casper mouthpiece. I wonder if Legere European works with that. I'm not sure without seeing it or hearing it, but it's worth a try just to see. And then Bert's saying, what fingers do you use for a trill? So that's a great question. It's the written note and the note above it following the key signature. Some trills are easy, or at least easier than others. If I'm playing a high E and I'm going to an F, that's pretty easy. If the fingering feels ridiculously hard, like I'm on my throat tone A and I have to go to high B, I'm not going to trill like this. There are usually cheating fingerings that we call trill fingerings. And if you just Google trill fingering chart, you'll probably see it. In this case, that's what some of these side keys are for. If I lingered on that fingering, it would be a little out of tune and the tone wouldn't be great, but I'm going so quickly on a trill that usually the audience can't hear it. All right, Lou says, I want to understand how close to the tip edge of the reed to the tongue. I'm hitting the reed about 1/8 of an inch below the edge. What is best? Great question. When we're tonguing, you know, the part of our tongue we use and where we hit the reed does influence the response and the tone. And many people have analyzed this. An awesome book, and I just checking to see if I have it handy. I don't have it handy. Cornell Wallach has written a book called Clarinet Articulations, where he actually went into a speech pathology lab and had electrodes placed all over his tongue that allowed them through imaging to see what his tongue did. I mean, he's a very fine player when he was trying different kinds of tonguing out. And he now has diagrams that show you it. But that's very cool. It's really interesting. You might enjoy finding out about it. But here's what I say. Even if you don't need to know exactly where it should go, as long as you find what works for you. For most people, you can try this and it feels very strange, but you put your clarinet in your mouth, close your lips so that literally there's no space, just like you're playing it, but then with your voice, you speak the word T, T, T. I'll show you. It feels very silly. The part of my tongue and the part of the reed that I'm hitting right now is probably great for your tonguing. And it may be different than what you do when you play clarinet. But that's just the quick and easy way to get it generally in the right place. I say T rather than ta, because that tends to have our tongue be high and arched, which for most classical playing and the sound we use in most traditional concert bands and orchestras, that gives us the best sound. Okay. Philip says, how do you deal with inherent pitch problems when playing a C clarinet? You transpose it on your B flat, Philip. No, that's what I do. Anytime you have a clarinet that doesn't play well in tune, and C clarinets and E flats are notorious for, many of them don't come with great tuning. You have to invent fingerings that work for you and just adjust it if you're playing with it. So if a note is sharp, sometimes we can slightly cover the hole below it to bring it down. Or if a note is flat, sometimes we can add some other keys, you know, adding this little key here will raise up a left-hand note a bit. You sometimes just have to be creative. And ideally, you want a clarinet that plays in tune. That's unfortunately the best answer there. Okay, there are so many awesome questions here. I'm going to just flip back over to Facebook where we have so many people there too. It's great to see you all. I sure appreciate having you all here. All right, so for some reason my Facebook page is not showing them all at the moment, so that's Facebook for you. How do you make it growl on purpose? Wendy from Facebook says. It's all of our sort of techniques that we use. You just have to practice it usually without your clarinet first. So growling, if you can gargle, then you can try doing that while you're blowing through your clarinet. And it's just kind of starting on an open G, which is really easy, or flutter tonguing, and then taking it from there. All right. Next question. What happens when you're playing one altissimo note and the following one just won't come out? Well, so you know, altissimo notes have odd fingerings. Sometimes if we're using unfamiliar fingerings, we may not be covering the holes all the way. So make sure your hands are in a good position. And on that note, we want our hands to be relaxed, arched fingers if possible, straight line from our hand to our wrist to our elbow. But usually, Linda, if a note doesn't come out, we're biting. And sometimes if we're really trying hard, we bite the reed shut and no air can go through and you get nothing out. Sometimes with a very high note, if you're making a sound, but it's a lower sound than you want, your air is not fast enough. So there's kind of different things that could cause it, but that's my guess. Sean says, some of my notes are fuzzy, such as low F, middle B, throat tones, especially when playing loud. How can I improve this? So that's a great question, Sean. There are many things that contribute to clear tone. One of the biggest ones is just imagining your air is moving quickly enough. So if we could see the air coming out of our mouth the way we can see water coming out of a hose, I can have my spray valve on this fine, misty, gentle spray. And if our air does that same thing, our tone will be fuzzy. If I go to power wash, one direct, fast stream of water, if I do that with my breath, it usually clears up the tone. So my guess is, Sean, you're not playing with fast enough air, and that's something you can work on. If your reed is fussy, that will affect it, but you're just picking out some notes more than others. So, and when you're playing loudly, you're probably using a lot of air already. The other thing it could be is what we call voicing, and that's the position our tongue sits on in our mouth. And we're not used to thinking about what our tongue does if we're just slurring or holding a note, but we should be. So for most, again, classical sort of sounds, I'm going to grab a piece of paper here. This, you can laugh at my art because I'm not, oh boy, this is one of the worst drawings I've ever done. Okay, it's a clarinetist with a very deformed face. All right, this is a clarinetist, and here's his clarinet. Poor guy is just very deformed. But we have our big lungs, a small windpipe, and then this big opening in our mouth. And if we're blowing with really fast air and it hits this big space, it slows down. Our tongue can act as a bridge. So if you're just joining us, this is not how to draw badly. This is ask Michelle any question you have about clarinet playing. Sean, the way we think about that, it's as if we're saying he with kind of a huh sound. And if I was to play my high C, my very reactive note, and having my tongue, I'll turn this way, move up and down, you'll hear the difference. So this is an x-ray of what my tongue is doing. It really affects the sound. If I do it on an open G, we won't hear the pitch bend so much, but we will hear the sound fuzz out. So clarinet voicing can make a difference to us, and I'm hoping that helps you. Someone just posted a lovely link on the Facebook page. Wendy, I thank you for that. I'm going to see if I can copy this to those that are on Zoom. It's actually a link to Cornell's articulation book that I was discussing. So if you're on Zoom, open up your chat, and I've just posted it there, and it's also on the Facebook feed, talking about his book, Articulation Types for the Clarinet. Cornell, K-O-R-N-E-L, Wallach, W-O-L-A-K. So that's a really nice resource. Thank you, Wendy, for responding to people's questions there. All right. Continuing on with your questions, these are great questions. Someone says, any barrel recommendations? So there are kind of a couple of reasons we might want to experiment with a different barrel. One of the biggest ones is tuning. If your clarinet tends to play out of tune, having the proper length barrel can make a big difference. And just to give you a really quick version of it, most B-flat clarinets come with a 65 or a 66 millimeter barrel. That's a measure of the length. If you're looking at your tuner and for where you play, you're always really sharp. And the clarinets are designed to play a bit sharp because they respond to changes in heat affects the tuning. The hotter it is, the sharper we play. So if you're in a room full of band people all blowing hot air, you're going to go sharper, in which case we pull the barrel. And pulling about 1 millimeter, in my experience, makes about 10 cents difference on our tuner. If you're regularly pulling more than 1 millimeter, you probably want a barrel that's 1 millimeter longer. And if you have to pull 2 millimeters, maybe you need a barrel that's 1.5 millimeters or 2 millimeters longer. These are things you can explore. The other reason, though, is that there are so many wonderful barrels being designed now, different types of wood. This one, although it's dark, it's cocobolo wood. You can see it's a little bit more reddish than the rest of my clarinet. There's different shapes, different designs. So this one here is the Bakun Lumiere barrel. I absolutely love the tone and response it gives. It gives me much more range of tone color. And again, like all equipment, it's worth a try. If you have a plastic clarinet, putting a wooden barrel on it can really warm up the sound of your clarinet. And maybe you're not in a position to invest in a fully wooden clarinet, but a wooden barrel is in your budget. That can, you know, I've heard some people on a good plastic clarinet with a professional barrel sound virtually indistinguishable from someone with a standard intermediate wooden clarinet. So it's a great upgrade for your instrument. I like the Bakun ones. There are lots of good ones out there. So, you know, see what you have in your area. All right, so many comments here. I don't think I'm going to get to all of them. I'm going to just answer as many as I can. And perhaps this is a sign that we need to do another one of these sessions in the near future. All right, so let's see, Dawn. Oh, okay, so people are answering each other's questions, which is great. I love the worldwide community we have, so thank you. Natalie says, any exercises you would recommend to train the tongue to be higher in the mouth, in addition to remembering to say he? Great question, Natalie. I just talked about how we want our tongue to be high. One of the best exercises I have, because it's kind of nebulous, we can't see our tongue while we're playing, might be hard to figure out where it is to take a tuner and turn your tuner on and slowly play from your high G at the top of the staff up note by note to the high C. If the tuner, and I can't remember if I'm mirror image or not, but I would say I'm trying to go low. If each note gets progressively lower, it's a very good indicator that your tongue is probably too low. So try and get that high C to match your G. And in doing so, the needle, just watching the needle helps us create that shape. It'll get it there. And if we can get it so that the high C is as the same amount in tune as the other notes, our tongue is probably high. That's a really good warm up to do every day to help you get used to what it feels like. And over time, our ears start to hear the difference between that high C with good voicing and the high C with not so good voicing. And eventually, the good news is it becomes automatic. We start to like the sound we make when our tongue's in the right place, and we start to do it automatically. But that process takes some time. Okay. Warlow, that's how Zoom calls you. Do you have any ideas how I can reduce the over tonguing as my tonguing on the reed is too heavy? Great question. That's really common. I think that goes along with when we concentrate, we have tension. So whether it's biting or our tongue hammering on the reed, anytime we can identify a problem as well as you just identified yours, we want to create an exercise that allows us to focus only on that one thing. So I like to keep it really simple. Maybe I'll just take an open G and tongue. All I'm going to focus on, if this is my tongue, is having it barely move. When it comes off the reed, I'm not going to allow it to back up very far because then I can get a lot of momentum, and I'm just going to have it hit really lightly. And our body and brain are so conditioned to do habits. We want to find ways to shake it up. I might practice it by doing something weird like speaking first. I'm kind of saying T, 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 but I'm focusing on my tongue being really light. And then I might loosen my jaw. I call this the whisper technique, so I'm just blowing air in. I'm gonna lean right into my mic. You'll be able to hear my tongue hitting the reed. There's me hammering. Now I'm just gonna try and do it lighter. So you can actually literally hear your tongue hitting the reed. Hopefully I was close enough to the mic you could hear it. If not, certainly here in person I could hear it clearly, and you with your clarinet can do that. And then just play an open G and just sort of play one pitch at a time, and you're gradually teaching your body to learn new habits. And I think that's how it's going to work. So many great questions here. All right, Facebook, if you want to get a more Dixie or New Orleans tone, how do you do that? Great question. So for playing in different styles of music like klezmer or Dixieland jazz, we tend to bend pitch a lot and move it around, and our tongue can do that. If I take my high C and go E, ah, E, you'll hear my tongue bending all over the place. And so I've made my whole embouchure and mouth and voicing much more open, and that gives me some flexibility. And, you know, frankly, if you're doing a lot of specialized music like that, you'd also pick a mouthpiece that tends to have a more big open sound. So equipment can affect it, but those are the kind of things that change it. All right. Sandra says, how do you prevent a hissing sound in the G to B flat notes? That's really similar to the question we had earlier from Sean. It's usually a sign your air is not moving fast enough. So, hi from New York City. I have problems getting high notes to come out nicely with good tone, no squeaking. Okay, I think I answered that. Hey, I'm already ahead of myself. All right. Emily says, how do you tongue high G, the fourth line above the staff, or even F below that? So when we're in the extreme high range, our altissimo, if our air is really steady and we can play that G and hold it, we should be able to tongue it well. The challenge is, I need a sip of tea. That's my challenge at the moment. Our challenge is a very common bad habit we fall into when we're tonguing. It's so natural. I've never met a clarinetist who doesn't do this, so we all have to train ourselves not to do it, is that when our tongue moves on the reed, we like to change our airflow. So here's me tonguing. This is what my air likes to do. It likes to be loud at the start and then fade. And the altissimo requires strong, consistent, strong air. And so we need to train our air not to change when our tongue is moving. I imagine if we had our tongue outside of our mouth, we were doing inside out tonguing, I would just be blowing. My tongue interrupts it, it blocks it, but I'm still blowing. And just doing that, what I just did, blow with your hand blocking it, kind of gives you an idea what it should feel like when we're tonguing. Then I can whisper that and hear my breath. If I'm falling into the bad habit, I'm going to hear that. So my guess is, Emily, if that altissimo G works when you're just sustaining it, but not when you're tonguing, it's because you're changing something. Now, could also be that when you tongue, you're tightening up. So we want to make sure our embouchure is solid, but also that our air is nonstop. And I'm guessing that's going to help you get some better results. All right, someone else here says, I've heard your embouchure should be relaxed. How can it be relaxed when you're doing all the things your mouth should do? Here's the challenge. We can overload our brain. Say, okay, I have to think about angle. I have to think about my lips. I have to think about my tongue. And our head will explode. Don't explode your head. Instead, as part of your practice routine, just focus on one thing in a really intense, meaningful, conscious way for about 2 minutes. And then focus on a different thing. And these are training exercises that over time will start to integrate so that we don't have to think about them and we start to do them. You need to have a training routine. I think if someone says your embouchure should be relaxed, they're probably meaning don't bite, don't have jaw tension in the wrong place. But there are some muscles that are engaged. I'm pulling my bottom lip and chin down away from the reed. I'm bringing the corners of my face in and down that really support. So it's not relaxation. It's just making sure we don't have tension in the wrong places. And if I were working on embouchure, I would do it using long tones, just one note for a long time, then a different note where I have time to give that one aspect of my playing the attention that it deserves. All right. We are getting close to the end of our hour, and there are so many great questions coming in. I may not get to answer all of them. So here's some invitations for you. If you're not a member of the Clarinet Mentors community and somehow you've just stumbled across this, please join at www.learnclarinetnow.com. That's my main kind of contact to join the community. I send out a newsletter with free training videos, and every time I do these sessions, I save your questions and I'll notice there's themes. Wow, a lot of people were asking about tonguing, and then you may see a YouTube video coming out about that issue. So I really do appreciate your feedback on it. I also have many courses that, you know, take some of my best training and put them in an organized system with, you know, worksheets and videos and repertoire to work on. And if you're interested in any of that, there'll be links if you sign my site. I'd love to have you join them. They all have free sample videos. So I will in fact post the link to my main website. I should have had that at the ready, but where you can actually just find samples of it. I'll do that before we finish. It's members.clarinetmastery.com. That's the site. You'll find samples there, and, you know, use the resources, find teachers in your community, find community bands to play with, but I'd love to help you out as much as I can. I have, but while I'm mentioning it, I mentioned this to you all earlier. I do have, I didn't want to call it Black Friday because there's Black Friday and there's Cyber Monday. I have a special, I'm calling it Clarinet Friday. So if you go to www.clarinetfriday.com, there's a great special there. And it's actually focusing on rhythm. And I'm not going to do a big sales pitch. I'm really here to serve you with answering questions. But there's information about the special, but there's also links to all the free training videos related to it that I've been sending out this week at the bottom. So you can just kind of binge watch them, see if it's a good fit for you. It's a great deal. There's 3 courses in one I've packaged together to help you out, but it includes live training sessions like this, except you'll be able to join on video and ask me questions. So that may be of interest to you. I also do have a monthly live training program where people come from all over the world and we do mini master classes. It's more interactive. Today, I'm just reading your questions and answering them. In our regular sessions, we do a couple times a month. You can come on and ask me questions directly. So that's another thing you might be interested in. All right. I have a couple door prizes here. Thanks to my friends at Bakun Musical, there's a Bakun Wood Clare Care Kit. So here's the way I do my door prizes. I'm going to write down a number on a piece of paper. And this number's, and what I want you to do when I tell you the range, you get to have one answer, type it into the comment screen. And the first person who I see that has the right answer gets to win the prize. So a number between 40 and 60. Start typing, and I'm going to look for that answer. Holy cow, that's going fast. I did see it though. I think. Okay, yes. And it's from Natalie. So Natalie, who wrote 41, if you please can send me an email, michelle@clarinetmentors.com, and let me, you know, give me your, I guess I'll need your full mailing address so I can send you this great care kit. All right, now for my grand prize today, I just want to give away to help you any one of my Clarinet Mentors courses. This could be my Clarinet Friday package, which is an amazing deal. Could be Better Clarinet Tone or Mastering Clarinet High Notes. And we're going to use the same approach, except we're going to pick different numbers. So now I want you to go between 80 and 100. And it's just going to be the first one I see with the right number. There's so many scrolling by. So if you're not the first one, it's just whoever I see, and I'm looking at Facebook as well. So let me see what we have. Okay, I see it. It's Bruce Sanfilippo. 96. I know other people had 96 too. It's just somewhat random, the first one I saw. So Bruce, if you can send me an email, michelle@clarinetmentors.com. Let me know if you have a course you would like, or go to the members.clarinetmastery.com and check out the courses there. Let me know what you'd like. So for everyone who's joined us today, it's such a pleasure to be interacting with you with this worldwide community of clarinetists. It's one of the funnest things I do, and I really do enjoy trying to help you play more easily. I hope you'll consider joining the Clarinet Friday course or some of my other courses, but at any rate, your participation here really helps me. It gives me lots of ideas, and I hope that you'll see some of your questions answered at a later session if I didn't get to them today. So thank you so much. If you're on Facebook, the replay will be available almost instantly once I sign off here. And thanks to all my friends and who've joined in and watched. I really appreciate it. I will do this again. It's been really fun. So I'm going to sign off. Appreciate you being here. Have a great time with your clarinet, and I hope to see you all soon. Bye-bye.